A freight container brimming with gold evaporated completely from Baltimore port in 1985. The matter perplexed federal law enforcement, ground to a halt within months, and was discreetly archived in official records. Nearly 40 years later, a commonplace storage locker auctioned publicly exposed a locked compartment tucked behind vintage tools. Inside lay 6 gold bullion bars, all painted with black coating. When a single serial number became partially visible, it traced directly to that chilled October night. Throughout October 1985, Baltimore Port operated at peak capacity, with merchandise flowing according to rigidly supervised schedules. The dock's supply chain mechanisms relied on procedural order and record keeping, especially within high-security sectors allocated for valuable shipments. Within such a sector, a container scheduled for Miami to New York transit arrived punctually. The bill of lading indicated it held 20 gold bullion bars valued collectively at $31 million. The cargo received documentation upon arrival, registration in the yard's inventory database, and placement in a designated staging zone awaiting onward shipment. All processes appeared normal. At dawn shift commencement on October 17th, the container was absent. No departure registration existed in the system. Yard personnel began examining adjacent container stacks, suspecting internal repositioning error. At 9 a.m., security staff raised the alert, and by noon, terminal management officially declared the container missing. Internal paperwork was filed, and port officials alerted federal agents within 24 hours. When investigators commenced chain of custody review, they immediately confronted the primary irregularity security cameras monitoring the quadrant. Housing the container had failed less than 24 hours before the vanishing. A maintenance requisition citing video interference and suspected electrical fluctuations was filed and authorized by a certified contractor managing electrical infrastructure throughout the port. The outage timing, paired with the cargo's sensitivity, sparked immediate sabotage concerns. Further inquiry revealed a truck departed the port at 3:40 a.m. that same night. The vehicle's exit received authorization through a work directive for emergency extraction of defective equipment. The documentation displayed Charles Lawson's signature, the senior night shift coordinator. Under interrogation, Lawson claimed he authorized the departure following oral instruction from an unnamed supervisor and failed to verify the container's number. He insisted the operation appeared routine and urgent. Surveillance footage from the control office confirmed his presence at his workstation throughout the shift. His narrative, chronologically at least, remained intact. The work directive underwent detailed scrutiny. It referenced a fictitious internal job identifier and listed an imaginary serial number for the removed equipment. The vehicle employed for transport wasn't among the port's regular logistics fleet. The truck was leased under false identity using fabricated identification papers, with the contract executed through a local vehicle rental agency by an individual never seen again. The security guard stationed at the gate reported the driver displayed legitimate-appearing paperwork and wore regulation-reflective vest and ID badge. No grounds existed to suspect criminal intent at that moment. The Federal Bureau of Investigation assumed case control. Forensic units scrutinized every available trace from entry and exit records, security booth logs, equipment logs, and staff access documentation. The container's serial number joined an international watch list, and gold bar serials were circulated to banks, smelters, and major commodity merchants. No matches surfaced. The investigation shifted inward. Profiles were developed for personnel with container schedule access, dispatch authority, or security system vulnerability knowledge. Internal politics, discontented former staff, and disciplinary records underwent thorough examination. Several names emerged, including recently terminated individuals or those with unexplained financial transactions, but no leads generated concrete evidence. The coordinator, Charles Lawson, remained under scrutiny. Though his account appeared coherent and his security footage presence confirmed his physical location, investigators challenged his willingness to authorize after-hours extraction based solely on verbal instruction. Still, no evidence linked him to the truck, fraudulent work order, or the operations architects. No money trails surfaced, no lifestyle changes, and no overseas accounts. The forensic audit yielded nothing actionable. Without fingerprints, surveillance footage, or an identifiable purchaser for the stolen gold, the investigation stalled. Alternative hypotheses circulated within the investigative task force. Some agents believed the heist was orchestrated by professionals with insider access, possibly contracted from outside the port. Others speculated it was an inside job executed by employees with detailed knowledge of surveillance gaps, documentation protocols, and shift schedules. A minority proposed the entire disappearance was staged insurance fraud, though no evidence suggested collusion between the port and insurance provider. Months passed. Leads evaporated. Search warrants produced only dead ends. In 1986, the case received reduced priority. In 1987, the FBI's Major Crimes Division officially transferred it to cold case status. By spring 1988, the file was boxed, labeled unresolved, and shelved deep within a federal archive facility. From law enforcement perspective, the theft was a phantom crime, perfectly timed, cleanly executed, professionally concealed. The container's vanishing left no credible witnesses, physical evidence, or digital trail. The gold, worth millions, had apparently evaporated overnight. The perpetrators vanished with it, leaving only a gap in port security history and a closed case file with excessive unanswered questions. For over 30 years, the case remained dormant. Occasionally, junior agents or journalists retrieved the file for review, but without new evidence, revival proved impossible. The names on work orders faded. Rental records were purged, and once suspected men either disappeared or merged back into society. Container XM-45789's disappearance became a cautionary tale in logistics circles, an occasional reference in security training modules. But for most involved parties, it was forgotten. This changed in 2023 when a forgotten container in a rented storage unit would reopen the sealed file and thrust the case back into the spotlight. What had remained invisible for decades would suddenly begin materializing again, piece by piece, propelled by a simple accident nobody anticipated. In July 2023, the dense industrial blocks of Kensington, a rough northeast Philadelphia neighborhood, served as backdrop for a routine public auction. Dozens of storage units faced liquidation due to years of unpaid rent, their contents legally forfeited and available to bidders, hoping for resale value hidden among abandoned possessions. Unit E119 was among them. It had remained unopened for over a decade. The rental was inactive since 2012, with no next of kin claiming ownership per policy. The facility maintained it 9 years before initiating legal abandonment process. With no payments received and nobody responding to multiple certified notices, contents were cleared for liquidation. Among bidders that day was 34-year-old Darius Holloway, a former long-haul trucker who recently established a side business around reselling unclaimed storage lots. Armed with modest budget, an eye for overlooked value, he placed winning bid on E119, intrigued more by its exterior size and location than expectation of hidden treasure. From outside, the battered roll-up door and weather-stained lock suggested little more than dust and mildew within. Upon opening, his expectations were largely confirmed. The unit was packed with rusted metal shelving, broken power tools, plastic bins filled with tangled cords, a dented red generator, and stacked cracked milk crates. Most items appeared worthless. It was the type of locker he typically processed quickly, separating scrap metal from anything resaleable. But working toward the back wall, an unfinished plywood section caught his attention. It didn't match the remaining wall construction. One panel appeared clean, newer, lightly nailed into the studs behind it. Using a pry bar, Darius removed the panel and uncovered a small compartment built directly into the floor. Inside was a single steel box painted flat gray and secured with basic padlock that snapped open with minimal effort. The box was heavy, unnaturally so for its size. Opening it, he found 6 solid bars, each roughly brick length, coated in dull black substance. Initially, he assumed it was lead or industrial metal sealed for transport. The surface was smooth but dense, with one corner scraped, revealing something bright and reflective beneath. He used a utility knife to strip away part of the black layer. Underneath was gold. On one bar, faint but visible, was partial stamped marking, MI8511006. He photographed it and replaced the bar in the box. Uncertain of his find, he uploaded the image to an online forum for metal collectors and began searching the code himself. A few links led to obscure auction databases, but one result stood out: a scanned newspaper article dated October 1985 from Baltimore Sun. The headline referenced a mysterious heist at Baltimore Port involving vanished gold bar shipment. The article mentioned serial numbers of missing bullion, and Darius's image matched the format exactly. The context transformed instantly. This wasn't scrap. This wasn't misplaced industrial metal. This was part of a federal crime scene missing 38 years. Darius knew he held something dangerous, possibly illegal to possess, and potentially the key to solving a cold case most had forgotten. Rather than risking legal trouble by moving or selling the bars, he contacted Philadelphia Police Department and requested officer response to the scene. The responding unit confiscated the box and notified FBI. Within days, the bars were transferred to federal lab for analysis. Each bar weighed precisely 12.4 kilograms and registered 99.99% pure gold. The serial number Darius had partially uncovered was confirmed matching one of 20 serials published in 1985 as part of FBI's Stolen Assets database. The remaining bars, though their markings were deliberately obscured, showed identical weight and dimensions. X-ray imaging revealed original serial stamps were still present beneath black coating. Investigators documented the locker entirely. Photographs captured all remaining contents, including crude hiding space behind false panel. The plywood covering the compartment had no manufacturer date, but was consistent with retail materials from late 1990s or early 2000s. This suggested hiding place was added years after theft, but before final rental payments stopped. Storage facility records showed the unit was rented under name Lamont Hill, with listed address in South Philadelphia. Payment records indicated locker was paid through mix of cashier's checks and money orders until 2012, after which all contact was lost. This detail triggered 1985 case reactivation. A secure email from Philadelphia field office was sent to FBI's National Archive Division, which held original case file under reference 85 BMZ 176. Within 48 hours, entire archive, including internal memos, crime scene photos, interview transcripts, and manifest documents, was transferred to Bureau's Major Theft Task Force. What had been dormant nearly 4 decades was suddenly active again. For first time since original investigation went cold, federal agents had physical evidence in their hands. Gold that was not just linked by weight and purity, but by serial number, container code, and smuggling profile. The only question now was how gold had ended up in dusty storage unit in Philadelphia, and who had placed it there. The bars had remained untouched for decades, suggesting person who hid them either never returned or never dared try. The name on rental documents was the only starting point investigators had, but even that small detail opened door to new phase in case. As files were unboxed and leads began surfacing, silence that had defined Baltimore gold heist for 38 years was finally broken. The moment FBI confirmed gold bars found in Philadelphia storage locker matched serial numbers from 1985, Baltimore heist cold case was officially reopened. Agent Reginald Brooks, seasoned investigator specializing in long unsolved federal crimes, was assigned to lead operation. His first step was retrieving complete archive of original investigation labeled 85 BMZ 176 from Bureau's off-site storage facility in Virginia. Files arrived in 4 sealed boxes: weathered folders, microfilm rolls, logbooks, and photo negatives documenting every inch of Port's layout, interview notes, shift schedules, and forensic reports. Brooks started with new material. Contents of Storage Unit E119, chain of custody for recovered gold, was meticulously documented. Forensic analysis had already confirmed gold's purity, weight, and serial format. Number MY8511006 was exact match with one of 20 bars declared stolen in 1985 incident. Although remaining 5 bars had been defaced with matte black coating, internal imaging confirmed original serials remained intact beneath surface. The wooden panel concealing steel box had no markings, but hardware store screws and plywood composition suggested it had been installed sometime between late 1990s and early 2000s. Storage unit had been registered under name Lamont Hill Brooks, submitted request for all available identity and background records. Hill, according to state databases, had died in 2018 at age 63. Philadelphia address associated with his driver's license matched billing address used for storage payments between 2003 and 2012. Payment records showed Hill had used money orders and cashier's checks, making it difficult to trace source of funds. No online accounts or email addresses were tied to rental, but Brooks found what he needed in Hill's affiliation. Lamont Hill had been member of Teamsters Local 132, listed as contract driver in Baltimore-Washington corridor during the 1980s. In 1985, he had temporary clearance for container pickups and drop-offs at Baltimore Port under short-term contract with logistics firm called Bay Harbor Freight. Company had ceased operations in 1987 and left behind disorganized paper trail, but Brooks requested archived tax records and internal audit files. One of those files contained scanned image of handwritten work order dated October 17, 1985, authorizing emergency removal of damaged cargo from South Terminal. Scanned form matched same format and terminology as fake documents used during Heist. Handwriting on form caught Brooks's attention. He retrieved copy of Hill's 1984 commercial license application, which included sample signature. Forensic handwriting expert compared two and concluded there was high probability they were written by same individual. With that connection established, Hill was placed at scene of theft, acting under authority of forged documentation. Next step was understanding who had authorized contract under which Hill was operating. Brooks dug into Bay Harbor Freight's corporate filings. Owner of record was man named Leo Grant, known figure in Bureau's organized crime database. Grant had been subject of 2 federal investigations in late 1980s for suspected firearms trafficking and customs fraud. Neither case resulted in prosecution, but both indicated his deep familiarity with port operations, shell companies, and falsified shipping manifests. Grant had died in 2009, but records suggested he was active in logistics sector at time of gold theft. Among archived inspection reports from Bay Harbor Freight was recurring name, Eldridge Marion, listed as subcontracted technician. Marion had been responsible for on-site electrical servicing at multiple East Coast terminals, including Baltimore. Further searches revealed Marion had filed maintenance request, which disabled security cameras in Gold Containers Quadrant on night of Heist. Request cited intermittent voltage dips and was logged without suspicion at time. His request was approved through standard contractor channel and executed within window leading up to theft. Now Brooks had 3 connected individuals, Hill, Grant, and Marion, each associated with one critical element of crime. Hill drove truck that removed container. Grant established paper trail and likely coordinated logistics. Marion created conditions for visual surveillance to be disabled. All 3 men were now deceased, but their involvement was supported by documents, signatures, work orders, and forensic evidence. Bureau could not prosecute, but Brooks had no doubt they had found key players. Case took on new dimension. While men could no longer be questioned, evidence of their coordination was mounting. Brooks focused on assembling timeline of communication and transactions between 3. He requested access to historical telephone metadata and banking records through federal subpoenas. Though limited by data retention laws, Brooks located several cash transactions made by Grant in weeks following theft, including $180,000 purchase of property in Arlington, Virginia in early 1986, paid entirely in cash. Marion's tax records showed significant spike in income that same year, despite no change in his contractual rates. Hill's financial activity, on the other hand, disappeared entirely after 1987, as though he had stepped off grid. Brooks assembled wall of documents in his field office, names, faces, contracts, rental agreements, tax forms, and surveillance blueprints from 1985. Single chain of events began emerging, linking each participant to one vital role. Precision of operation, absence of physical evidence, and long-term silence around stolen gold all pointed to premeditated crime executed with discipline and inside knowledge. What intrigued Brooks most was final piece, gold itself. While Grant and Marion had shown signs of profiting from theft, Hill had never done so. Gold bars remained untouched, buried in storage unit under his name, preserved behind makeshift wall, sealed and hidden, yet never sold or exchanged. Question was no longer who stole gold, but why one of them had chosen to keep his share out of circulation for nearly 4 decades. With connections now laid out and physical evidence locked away, case moved into its next phase. Brooks prepared full case brief to submit to Bureau's legal division. Though prosecution was no longer option, investigation still had room to grow. Priority shifted from securing convictions to completing narrative, identifying timeline, and recovering anything else that remained hidden. Silence that had cloaked crime for so long was finally giving way, and truth behind one of most well-executed cargo thefts was beginning to emerge in sharp, undeniable detail. As Agent Reginald Brooks sifted through expanding archive of records, he began drawing clear outlines around operation that had unfolded on night of October 17, 1985. Data no longer resembled fragments. With names, documents, and timelines now aligning, Brooks identified 3 individuals whose movements, responsibilities, and connections placed them at center of Heist. Each man had controlled one vital component. Leo Grant orchestrated logistics and paperwork. Eldridge Marion disabled surveillance and cleared path. Lamont Hill physically removed gold and ensured container vanished without trace. Grant had founded logistics company just 1 month before robbery. On paper, it was legally registered entity with active licenses, federal tax ID, and physical address in Delaware. State well known for its flexible incorporation laws, company existed long enough to acquire temporary contracts and submit legitimate-looking documents to Baltimore Port. Among those documents was forged work order used night of Heist, describing emergency removal of damaged technical equipment. Form bore company's letterhead, fabricated container number, and seal nearly identical to those used by official carriers. Routing number on document matched that of legitimate cargo manifest from unrelated shipment, borrowed from port's archives and repurposed for forgery. Attention to detail suggested premeditation and deep understanding of internal operations. Marion, listed in subcontractor logs as electrical technician, submitted maintenance request 48 hours before disappearance. Request cited inconsistent voltage readings in Sector B, precisely where container-carrying gold had been parked. Request was processed through port's third-party maintenance schedule, reviewed, and approved without any additional inspection. Surveillance blackout began at 2200 hours and lasted over 6 hours. During that window, no video footage was recorded. Review of technician entry logs confirmed Marion had been on site night of outage. Brooks located 2 separate maintenance job cards bearing his signature for that evening, one of which included falsified timeout entry, effectively covering his exit window. Lamont Hill's access had been set up weeks earlier. As contracted driver with routine clearance, he held valid credentials to enter and exit restricted zones. On night of Heist, he arrived in standard box truck registered under same shell company Grant had established Hill's vehicle log. Collected from dispatch ledgers stored in port archives, included his printed name on outbound movement form, time-stamped 3:40 a.m. Container serial on document didn't match any live entry, but clerks on duty failed to cross-reference it due to night shift fatigue and overwhelming backlog. Lawson, night shift dispatcher, approved release without hesitation, believing it was legitimate emergency removal. Hill then drove container out of port, bypassing scrutiny under cover of official paperwork, aided by inactive surveillance system and pre-cleared vehicle manifest. Within 30 days of incident, Leo Grant made major cash purchase, single-family home in Arlington, Virginia, paid in full with no recorded mortgage or loan. Financial records revealed no traceable withdrawal from banking institutions, suggesting payment was made in physical currency. Around same time, Marion registered ownership of 2 new trucks, each under different business name, both tied back to post office box in Maryland. These purchases marked clear elevation in financial capability, inconsistent with their prior income history. Hill, in contrast, vanished from institutional records. He submitted formal resignation from his driving contract within 2 weeks of incident. After 1986, He ceased filing federal tax returns, closed all known checking accounts, and disconnected his landline. Property records showed no purchases, and vehicle registrations under his name were discontinued. Brooks found no indication Hill attempted to launder or sell any part of stolen gold. Instead, his financial activity went completely dark, reinforcing theory he had opted to go underground, not for escape, but to avoid detection. Nearly 20 years later, Hill reemerged in administrative databases through rental of storage unit E119. Application was submitted under his legal name, but listed address was former residence, and contact information led nowhere. Payments were made using cashier's checks drawn from out-of-state bank. Storage lease remained active from 2003 until 2012, when automatic payment ceased. No one claimed contents after Hill's death in 2018 from documented heart attack. His storage remained sealed until default process transferred unit to public auction. According to family interviews conducted during investigation, Hill had become increasingly withdrawn in years after mid-1980s. He avoided long-distance travel, rarely answered personal calls, and declined most social engagements. Psychological analysis performed on basis of interviews with relatives and acquaintances suggested pattern of chronic anxiety and emotional withdrawal, likely related to long-term burden of unresolved criminal involvement. Those close to him knew he had been involved in something serious, but claimed never to have learned details. Brooks reviewed these patterns and concluded Hill had never attempted to liquidate his portion of stolen gold. Instead, he had hidden it, locked it away behind false panel in rented storage unit, and left it untouched. Decision may have stemmed from fear, guilt, or strategic belief that with enough time, gold would become untraceable. But time never provided cover he hoped for. Payments eventually stopped, unit was repossessed, and contents exposed. That rediscovery reactivated every dormant lead. Hill's actions, or inaction, provided vital link needed to reassemble crime. Each role was now defined. Grant supplied infrastructure, Marion controlled environment, and Hill executed movement. Together, their plan had succeeded without immediate consequence. But it was Hill's reluctance to spend single dollar that would ultimately betray silence. Case, long shelved and forgotten, was now closer to completion than it had ever been. What remained was to understand night itself, not through speculation, but through reconstructed truth. Reconstruction of events leading to 1985 Heist revealed calculated operation orchestrated with precision and built on detailed knowledge of port systems. Timeline reassembled through archived documents, contractor records, maintenance logs, and forged paperwork, suggested planning had begun at least 1 month before theft. Foundation of operation was formation of Delaware-registered logistics company established by Leo Grant. Firm existed on paper, held all necessary certifications, and allowed Grant to insert himself into logistical framework of Baltimore Port. From there, series of deliberate steps began to unfold, each one placing piece of operation into position. One of first official actions involved Eldridge Marion submitting maintenance request under his own subcontractor credentials. He cited intermittent voltage issues in surveillance equipment covering Sector B, designated zone where high-value cargo container was scheduled for short-term holding. Request was processed routinely and scheduled for execution on night of October 16th. Marion's entry was logged in service contractor register at 21:15. He carried identification, wore standard utility gear, and moved through perimeter without triggering suspicion. His repair summary was filed by 22:30, and surveillance footage ceased shortly after. For next 6 hours, cameras monitoring Sector B remained offline. At approximately 2:45, Lamont Hill received his final dispatch from Grant's front office. Paperwork he carried bore forged seal of fictitious logistics company and referenced emergency retrieval of damaged electrical equipment. Document contained plausible details, container number modeled after real manifests, routing information lifted from historical export schedules, and authorizing signatures that mimicked port administration handwriting styles. His vehicle was rented box truck with no commercial branding. Credentials used to enter yard had been cleared in advance by Grant's firm under guise of subcontracted cargo recovery service. Hill arrived at main gate without incident. Security officer on duty, working double shift, reviewed paperwork but failed to notice listed container number was not present on active outbound list. Fatigue, combined with appearance of formal documentation, led to cursory inspection. Hill was allowed entry at 3:08. He proceeded directly to Sector B, where container, marked, sealed, and loaded with 20 gold bars, was waiting in position. Loading bay crew had already ended their shift. No oversight remained on ground, and no cameras were recording. Inside dispatcher's office, Charles Lawson authorized movement based on emergency recovery order. He later told investigators he had received no prior warning, but had acted under pressure due to language in document, which suggested time sensitivity and potential insurance complications if delays occurred. Logbook noted release of container at 3:37. Truck exited compound 3 minutes later. By dawn, container was missing. Baltimore Port's manifest system, still operating on combination of handwritten logs and early digital indexing, showed gap in movement record. No outbound scan had been logged in automated registry. Container had left solely on strength of forged documentation. By time morning staff conducted their routine inventory check, theft was complete. There had been no forced entry, no breach of fencing, and no triggered alarms. Operation had unfolded within confines of system, not against it. Container was driven to rented storage site in industrial zone outside city. Rental agreements uncovered later showed warehouse space had been paid for in advance, with lease held under name of dissolved corporation. There, gold bars were removed, cataloged, and divided. Based on forensic financial analysis performed years later, investigators estimated Grant liquidated his portion. First property records linked him to 2 large cash purchases within next 24 months, including Arlington home acquired in 1986. Transactions traced through shell corporations and nominee buyers indicated pattern of asset laundering consistent with large-scale cash conversion. Marion's financial shift occurred more slowly. His earnings showed gradual elevation over 3 tax cycles, reflecting what investigators concluded to be incremental sale of physical gold to unregulated dealers. Vehicle acquisitions, business expansion, and cash-heavy contracts pointed to structured movement of illicit funds into legitimate operations. His activity never triggered red flags at time due to conservative pacing of his withdrawals and reinvestments. Hill, however, left no such trail. After fulfilling his role in transporting container, he cut ties with Grant's firm and withdrew from public visibility. His driver's license expired without renewal. No employment records surfaced in following years. He filed no income taxes. His address, history became patchy and inconsistent. Investigators found no large deposits, property titles, or asset transfers in his name. He had kept his share untouched, wrapped, and concealed deep within storage unit rented under his real name, but linked to outdated address and paid with anonymous instruments. 6 bars recovered in 2023 matched weight, dimension, and production markings of those stolen in Heist 5 had been painted black, crude but effective attempt to obscure their origin. 1 bar had only partially erased serial number, which allowed investigators to reconnect gold to original federal theft report. That connection revived case. Why Hill never attempted to sell or trade his share remained unknown. Psychological assessments of his behavior, compiled from interviews with former acquaintances, suggested he suffered from chronic paranoia and social withdrawal. He avoided extended travel, severed contact with former coworkers, and declined to explain reasons behind his self-imposed isolation. Whether fear of detection, guilt, or belief that time would erase suspicion governed his decision, end result remained same. His gold was never spent, never moved, and never traced until its accidental discovery decades later. That inaction proved pivotal. While other 2 members of operation had blended their profits into legitimate channels, Hill's decision to do nothing left behind single verifiable link to crime. Physical evidence he preserved, whether deliberately or by neglect, opened path for federal agents to reconstruct night that had eluded explanation for 38 years. Precision with which theft was executed had allowed perpetrators to escape immediate consequence, but flaw was built into silence itself. Container had vanished without sound, but one unspent fortune had kept it secret, waiting in dark. By early 2024, investigation into 1985 Baltimore Port gold theft reached its final conclusion after months of forensic accounting, property tracing, and cross-agency collaboration. Federal authorities formally closed case as solved. No criminal indictments followed. All three principal suspects, Leo Grant, Eldridge Marion, and Lamont Hill, had died years earlier. However, Department of Justice moved forward with civil asset recovery, targeting wealth and holdings proven to be acquired through proceeds of stolen gold. Primary focus turned to a state of Leo Grant records indicated that shortly after Heist, Grant had purchased residential property in Arlington, Virginia for cash. At time, transaction raised no suspicion as funds were funneled through limited partnership managed by nominee. But with benefit of retrospective scrutiny and context provided by reopened investigation, connection became undeniable. Forensic financial analysts mapped movement of liquid assets from Grant's logistics company into shell entity, then directly into real estate acquisition. Court authorized forfeiture proceedings, and property was seized. His surviving family contested decision, but federal attorneys presented sufficient evidence linking funding source to 1985 crime. In end, portion of estate was liquidated, and proceeds were absorbed into U.S. Treasury. Eldridge Marion's financial trail proved more modest, yet still traceable. Investigators documented several vehicle purchases and business investments in years following Heist, all executed through cash-heavy transactions. His widow had inherited 2 commercial trucks and small parcel of land in Baltimore County. Using bank subpoenas and archived utility registrations, investigators established these assets had originated during post-Heist window. Though Marion had never been convicted during his lifetime, circumstantial and financial evidence was considered compelling. Civil forfeiture order was issued, resulting in government reclaiming trucks and placing lien on property. These actions were carried out quietly, without public courtroom proceedings, but reflected justice system's approach to unresolved financial crimes tied to now-deceased individuals. Most unexpected twist came not from those connected to original crime, but from man whose random discovery reignited entire case. Darius Holloway, former trucker turned storage auction buyer, had followed protocol when he reported hidden compartment in Unit E119. His call to local police, his cooperation with investigators, and his voluntary surrender of bars met criteria outlined in federal law governing unclaimed or contraband property. Department of Justice, through Asset Forfeiture Program, awarded him 10% of recovered value bars, appraised at approximately $1.8 million, resulted in Holloway receiving formal reward totaling just over $180,000. Payout drew immediate media attention. Local news outlets interviewed Holloway, and story quickly spread across national platforms. Headlines dubbed it "Discovery of Gold from Nowhere," and articles speculated on bizarre timing, silence of decades, and sheer coincidence of how one forgotten box triggered reopening of multi-million-dollar federal theft case. True Crime Podcast dissected details. Online forums theorized about fourth accomplice. Documentary pitch circulated among streaming platforms. Holloway, initially unprepared for attention, gave limited statements and declined offers for public appearances. He remained consistent in interviews, maintaining he had no idea what he'd stumbled upon until serial number search led him to old news clipping. For federal agents like Reginald Brooks, who had led final phase of investigation, outcome offered professional closure. Despite inability to prosecute, ability to reconstruct crime, recover evidence, and legally seize assets validated years of cold case methodology. It was one of rare examples in which federal property crime was fully resolved not through confession or surveillance, but by accidental survival of primary evidence. In absence of live testimony or new witnesses, it was documents, financial trails, and gold itself that told story. Public viewed case as curiosity, elegant theft buried by time and resurrected by luck. But to those involved in investigation, it represented something far more intricate. Success of operation in 1985 had relied on exploiting weak points in bureaucratic systems, forged manifests, scheduled maintenance window, compliant overnight dispatcher, and well-orchestrated chain of silence fact that it held together for nearly 4 decades highlighted level of planning and discretion employed by perpetrators. Yet system had one weak link, one man who had chosen to do nothing with his share. Lamont Hill's inaction had preserved last untouched fragment of original crime. That untouched gold, painted over but never circulated, became thread that unraveled everything. His fear, his isolation, and perhaps his guilt meant bars remained sealed in forgotten storage unit, silently waiting for someone to find them. And when they were found, they brought with them not just wealth, but answers. Final case file now rested with Department of Justice. Stamped and archived as solved, bars were melted and recast into Treasury reserves. Recovered value was recorded against federal loss estimates for unresolved theft. No suspects remained to question, no charges were filed, but justice, however delayed, had left its mark. Thus ended story of gold that vanished into night from Baltimore docks. It had survived years in silence, untouched and unclaimed, until one misstep, missed payment on long-forgotten storage unit, allowed it to speak again. Case had faded from headlines, but not from history. And as investigators quietly filed their final reports, one fact remained. Even perfect crimes don't stay buried forever.